Hotly contested primaries for governor, Congress, the state legislature, county councils, and mayoral races in 2 counties set the stage for the 2018 general election. Voters had multiple choices in key contests, including the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. The state Supreme Court struck down the Con Am, but it was up to voters to decide the fate of a Con. Join in the discussion as we recap election 2018. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Election 2018 is over. Voters elected Governor David Ige to a second term and sent Mazie Hirono and Tulsi Gabbard back to Washington. Ed Case will return to Congress after more than 11 years. Voters in Kauai and Maui counties elected new mayors. And Republicans once again have one person in the 25-member Senate and held on to their 5 seats in the State House. There are new faces on the Board of Trustees for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and once again, voters rejected handily holding a constitutional convention. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Colin Moore is Associate Professor of Political Science and the Director of the Public Policy Center at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Catherine Cruz is the producer and host of The Conversation at Hawaii Public Radio. Chad Blair is a political columnist at Honolulu Civil Beat. And Colleen Uechi is a reporter at the Maui News. Welcome to our show for the first time. Let's start off on the top of the ticket. You know, I think a lot of people had hopes that Andrea Tupola would be a worthy opponent for David Ige, especially given the governor's slip-ups during the last couple of years. But boy, what happened? Chad, why don't you take a look at that if we look at the results while you talk about it?
Well, it was not a close race. It was nearly a 2-to-1 landslide. Ige and Green, Josh Green is running mate over Andrea Tupola and Marissa Kearns. She is charismatic, she's intelligent, she handles herself extremely well in front of the crowd, but something just seemed to fizzle, and certainly everyone who follows politics came to realize that Marissa Kearns and Andrea Tupola were not a team, and to have your lieutenant governor running mate actually openly criticizing you right after the primary is over, I mean, that just showed you how the rest of the general election was going to go.
Oil and water.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah,
do you think that was particularly a factor?
Yeah, I do believe that, you know. Like you said, Andrea Tupola, we watched her kind of rise up through the legislature, and I was surprised that she actually struck out for this top seat, you know, and I thought, oh, she's doing pretty well, but yeah. Didn't work at all.
But I mean, look, to win as a Republican in this state, you start from such a huge disadvantage from day one. I mean, this is the most democratic state in the country, as we often say. And even so, for example, if you look at how Duke Iona fared against Neil Abercrombie years ago, I mean, he did get a greater share of the vote than Andrea Tupola, but I mean, he still lost pretty badly. So it is just tremendously hard, even if you have talented candidates. But I agree with what Catherine and Chad said, is that Andrea Tupola is a very good candidate. She's a strong speaker. She's charismatic. I mean, you can sense her background as a music teacher and a performer. It really comes across well on camera. I think her closing speech, after she lost the election, a lot of people were joking that it looked like that was her victory celebration because it was so upbeat and positive.
Maybe she was just happy to be rid of Marissa.
Yeah,
Kearns.
well, that may very well be true.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Colleen Uechi from the Maui News. What was the perspective from Maui? What were you seeing that you thought was interesting to observe?
You know, it's interesting because, you know, Maui County in the primary actually supported Hanabusa, and I think that had, you know, a lot to do with, you know, Shansutsui, you know, him not always being happy in the Ige administration, then resigning, coming home, and supporting Ige's opponent. So, yeah, Maui County was for Hanabusa in the primary, but when it comes down to it, I think Maui County, you know, like the rest of the state, votes Democrat, so.
Did you see the candidates traveling? Was it a big deal if a candidate actually came to Maui? Did you see the candidates much this election?
Yeah, it's a big deal if the candidates come to Maui, but yeah, they didn't come as much. Ige came before, you know, the campaign started for different projects and different things, but we didn't see as much of Tupola.
You know, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting was how Ige seemed to take Tupola very seriously. He actually had some strategies meant to mess her up, like attaching her to President Trump. Colin, were you surprised at that he didn't just run this is what I've done as his campaign?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, connecting her to President Trump was a pretty easy move.
A no-brainer.
And a no-brainer, and of course, you know, that put her in a tough position because, I mean, Andrea Topola is a conservative, and she wasn't willing to disavow Trump. I mean, she said repeatedly she might have done things differently, but she still supported him. And I mean, when you're running as a Republican here, you are put in a difficult position because there are some hardcore Trump supporters here who would turn out to support you. Wouldn't appreciate you saying, well, you disagree with everything the president has done, but then how do you get those moderates? It becomes very difficult. So I think it was a smart move on Ige's part. I think the thing that surprised me, well, maybe not surprised me, but was a bit cynical from the Ige camp was his refusal really to debate one-on-one with Andrea Topola, and I think that was very clearly because she is a stronger debater, a stronger communicator, and has real charisma, unlike the governor.
Colin's absolutely right, and what the Ige campaign insisted upon is that you ought to have the lieutenant governor candidates along with them, and that Josh Green, a little bit stronger presence in terms of debating style, and to contrast with Marissa Kearns. And Kearns is a Trump supporter and not a shy one.
No.
And it was pretty remarkable to see Topola slipping and sliding whenever Ige brought up Trump. But that was a campaign strategy. It worked. You really did not see Ige and Topola side by side except for 2 televised debates. I don't remember any other appearance that I can think of. Nothing like the primary where Colleen Hanabusa and David Ige were everywhere.
We talk about, you know, how we really need a strong 2-party system, and we don't have that here. And so when you do have bright spots in the Republican camp, you know, you're thinking, oh, okay, there's some potential here. You know, we saw that with Beth Fukumoto when she gave her opening speech as the minority leader, and we were like, wow, she's really, you know, making points here. It's resonating, and then
She quickly left the party.
She's a Democrat. Yeah.
Colleen, the Republican Party has usually been strongest on Maui. I mean, is it Republicans on Maui, are they as disunified as they are on Oahu, or seem to be? Do they get along better with each other on Maui? Is it partisan over there?
That's hard to say. Yeah, Maui County is partisan kind of in a different way. It's not so much Democrat Republican. I think things changed after the mayor's race became nonpartisan. So I mean, there are, you know, Democrats and Republicans who still have the debate, but I think Maui kind of leans progressive in a lot of ways, and so there are a lot of people who are critical of President Trump.
What difference does it make, you know, that if you don't get along with your lieutenant governor candidate? I mean, we saw the Ige campaign, as you say, actively try to attach Topola to Marissa Kearns, but what difference does it make? I mean, should we even be running this way?
I don't think we should. I mean, I think that probably, I mean, in an ideal situation, the governor and the lieutenant governor would run together in the primary too. I mean, you're going to vote on a team in the general election. You want them to be able to work as a team. You have to trust that the lieutenant governor can take over for the governor if they're away or even on the mainland. And I think it was pretty clear that Marissa Kearns wouldn't have been up to that task. But they have to like each other. I mean, you know, to give a far less emotional example was the very poor relationship between Shan Satsui and David Ige. I mean, so poor that Colleen Hanabusa brought that up in one of the primary debates. Because our lieutenant governor basically has no powers except for name changes, as far as I'm aware. And so...
Do they even still do that?
Yeah, that's the one thing they still do. But their ability to do anything is entirely connected to their relationship with the governor. And I think then it's just a waste of state money and resources if you have someone who's an otherwise talented politician and public servant like Shan Satsui, who basically is told to go stand in the corner for a couple of years.
You know, there was a funny situation. Remember that Shan Satsui was actually, he didn't want to be lieutenant governor. Brian Schatz under Neil Abercrombie got appointed to take over Dan Inouye's seat in Congress, and Shan had to be convinced. In fact, he was even given an office on Maui, I think not in Kahului, but in Wailuku, right? Is that where but the point I'm trying to make here is that he had to be convinced to run. And then suddenly Abercrombie loses in a landslide to Neil Abercrombie, and there's Shan Satsui as a running mate with David Ige. And by the way, Satsui's a former Senate president, Ige a former WHAM chair, just a very strange pairing.
And if I recall, Shan Satsui was supposed to be the sports guy. He was going to bring in, you know, sports tourism, and I don't know what happened to that.
Well, we didn't even get the MMA. I wanted to say, Julie, Colleen.
My mom's name is Julia. So.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay, I feel better. I mean, that you mentioned earlier that Shansitsui was important to Maui. Do you see him coming back around as a politician?
I don't know. We've talked to him about that at the Maui News, and for now he's saying, he wants to focus on family. He took his daughter to college, and that made him, think about a lot of things. So we'll see where he ends up going. But for now, he's out of the political spotlight. But we thought for a bit he might make a run for mayor, and that would have made for a very interesting conversation. But yeah, like I said, for now, he's stepping out.
We've talked quite a bit about the Republican Party, and Colin, how do you feel that they ended up at the end of this election finally in Hawaii generally?
Look, they ended up all right. I mean, they were in serious danger because Andrea Topola's seat was for sure going to be won by a Democrat, of dropping down to 4 seats in the House and 0 in the Senate. They managed to maintain 5 in the House, which is what they had going into the election, and they gained 1 in the Senate. I think that was one of the more surprising pickups. They won. Matt LaPresti, the Democrat, lost to Kurt Favela, the Republican, and I don't think a lot of people were expecting that. I mean, they knew that Matt LaPresti was in a bit of danger because he was found to be stealing a flyer during the primary, and it's tough to return if people start to question your integrity. So I think Shirlene Ostrov should be very pleased. I mean,
the chair of the Republican.
The chair of the Republican Party, exactly, because her challenge always is to recruit quality candidates to run, and you can see that they've been very challenged by that. I mean, they don't always have good candidates, or even sane candidates sometimes, and so. And so Kurt Favela, Val Okimoto, who won in Mililani, Beth Fukumoto's old seat. I mean, these are good candidates, engaged with the community, willing to put in the work. And I think if they show a couple of victories, then it's easier to convince other Republicans who are good candidates, who are well connected, to say, look, give this a shot, because no one wants to go out there and put their family and themselves in the spotlight if they're just going to be a sacrificial lamb. But to show that they can win is really important for the next round.
I'm going to throw a little cold water on that. I see where you're coming from, but if you think about it, were it not for Matt LaPresti, they would not have picked up a Republican seat in the Senate.
That's true.
And remember that Andrea Topola's own seat, they didn't even have a Republican run once Sai Timoteo was disqualified, and that would have been a sure Republican seat, pretty good bet. And they focused on the lower end of the ticket. That was intentional on the part of Ostrov to try and build the party from the roots. But look who they ran for governor, for the Congress, for both houses of Congress and the Senate. Those people lost in landslides.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's a very modest victory. I'm not even going to use that word, but it could have been a lot worse.
Could have been worse.
Yeah, but
Catherine, as a former television reporter, how much power do you think that story about Matt LaPresti getting caught on video stealing the campaign brochures had? And do you think it was fair that the voters may have responded strongly to something like that?
Well, that area, I mean, he's not the first candidate to have defaced somebody, his opponent's sign. I think we saw that happen, before.
But it was caught on camera.
Yeah.
This is in our brave new world.
Right. And I think there was another candidate where that actually happened. He was caught.
If you actually look at
if
you actually look at the numbers, it was only 117 votes that separated Kurt Favela from Matt LaPresti, and that's that's a very, very tight race. Not as tight as Tommy Waters and Trevor Ozawa at 22 votes.
But it would have been. I mean, Matt LaPresti would have easily won. I think.
So, and he won the primary very handily against a pretty good candidate, Alicia Maluafiti. But I think it hurt him, and if I recall correctly, the campaign flyer removal, for which he apologized, that happened very near the end of the primary, so probably not enough to affect that race.
It was like the day before.
The day before.
Yeah.
Did you guys have wacky political stories on Maui this year?
Where do we begin?
What happened to Alan Arakawa?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting. I mean, there were kind of warning signs already in the primary because he finished second to Tasha Kama, who was, a political newcomer. So he lost by about 900 votes, but what was interesting in the general was how much he lost by. It was about almost 11,000 votes, in the general. So I think part of it is because he's been in office for a long time. People want new, fresh face, and that's Tasha Kama. But also, Tasha Kama said something interesting after the election. She said, I wish I could say that it was me. I wish I could say I'm good and smart, but it wasn't. It was his own doing.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. That the candidate is actually sort of sorry that her opponent was such a poor opponent.
Yeah, because I'd heard some people say, you know, a vote for Tasha Kama was just as much a vote against Arakawa,
Right.
and you know, she kind of alluded to that in her comment.
Well, you know, since we're talking about Maui, I mean, one of the underreported stories has been the resurgence of a whole new council majority there, built around a single issue primarily, right? I mean, I understand that they're all associated with sort of an anti-development attitude. Is that correct?
To give a little context to what's going on in Maui County right now, a lot of it has to do with the 2014 election, which if you guys remember, that's when the GMO initiative passed, and then later
Narrowly.
got struck down. Yeah, later got struck down by the courts, and so that generated a lot of frustration and created, you know, this, you know, groundswell of support for candidates who would value environment over big corporations, people over special interests. And so they had this movement, you know, the Ohana candidate movement, to support these 9 candidates who would have these values. And so, yeah, now there are a majority of 5 Ohana candidates on the council. So that's a switch from the last time around. So changing the power balance.
Yeah,
like
when
you have in Honolulu.
Victorino was talking the night he was elected, just the other night, he made a point of saying it's going to be tough to deal with this council. What does he mean by that, do you think?
You know, yeah, I talked to him right after the election. He said, oh, some people are already expressing concerns that, you know, this is a, you know, Ohana majority council, and he wasn't endorsed by the Ohana coalition. But he said, you know, I'm going to do what I can to work with everyone. And that's what the council members are saying too. You know, they said, we don't see this 5-4 majority, but everyone else does. So it's going to be up to them to prove that they can work together and be collaborative. So that's what they're all emphasizing. So I hope, for all of our sakes, that they're able
Anybody
to
else
do that.
weigh in on the Maui Council?
Well, it sounds nice in kumbaya, but you know how these things work. Very quickly they're going at it, and I do think the development issue, or the anti-development issue, and you saw that in the GMO protest, it was really happening there. I think it's quite remarkable what happened. Another thing that happened that didn't get much attention, and you know much more than I do, the charter question regarding the short-term rentals. And this idea that it now goes from, what, $1,000 a day to
20,000.
and then an additional
10,000 every day after
I mean,
that.
this is if you're violating the rules for rentals. I mean, this is a statewide problem, and that to me might be a model for other counties.
Yes, Maui's been at the forefront, because I remember at the Ledge hearings on vacation rentals, you know, Maui County was out there saying, we're doing this, we're trolling the internet. You know, you've got the companies that because of the time difference, they knew that the inspectors, you know, shut down 4:35 o'clock, and so as soon as the close of business, and boom, the ads go up, and then they take them down at 8 o'clock Hawaii time.
Well, Maui could be sort of like a canary in a coal mine on this alert to the rest of the state that this might be happening and might be a wave across the state, or do you think Maui's completely unique?
Hawaii County also has current legislation pending. I don't know the exact parameters of it, but they're trying to do something. And we have struggled here on Oahu. Kirk Caldwell had a bill. It didn't make it. It's now been revised to comport with what the Planning Commission.
Right, shut down.
It looks better, and it's going to go back, but it seems to be that the recognition is that this is primarily a county issue. The legislature really didn't. I mean, they talked about having an Airbnb bill, but nothing really ever happened.
Let me start respecting some of our viewers calling in. These orange cards come bouncing in, and I didn't really have a chance to explain to Colleen. When I read these, I'm not ignoring you. So a couple of questions along the lines of the two-party system, Tupola, Trump. The debate was why Tupola did so poorly. No one who associates with Trump can do any good in Hawaii. What does that say about the future of the Republican Party here if, I mean, the president continues to be president?
Well, it's grim. I mean, and even if I think they did okay in this current election, there's no real path to power for them. And I think part of this is what has gone on nationally. So we often say that all politics is local, but today really all politics is national. In other words, people decide whether or not they're Republicans or Democrats based on this national brand, which makes it very, very difficult for parties to carve out sort of a local identity that might be more liberal or slightly more conservative than the national brand. Because people follow politics at the top of the ticket. And so, you know, they certainly know who the president is, they might know who their senators are, they don't know who their member of the state legislature is. And so that used to be more possible, but now it is far less easy to do that. And I think the Republican Party here really will pay the cost, because if you imagine Linda Lingle or people who have had success as a Republican in the past, they could sort of Pat Psyche pitch themselves as kind of center-right alternatives to the ruling Democrats. But that has become nearly impossible to do anymore.
I'm not sure there is a Republican Party anymore. I think it's a Trump party nationally. The most enthusiastic supporters in the Republican Party were Trump supporters 2 years ago. I mean, you had the old stalwarts, the mainstream Republicans wanting Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, and of course that just didn't happen. But remember this, as small as we are, percentage-wise, and I think as a former Californian, you can back me up on this, proportionally, Trump did worse here against Hillary Clinton than any other state. I think maybe D.C., District of Columbia, but even California. So Trump, despite his popularity in a lot of other places, not popular here in Hawaii.
Let me, I've got a couple more questions about two-party system, and let's put this off for a little while, see what kind of other questions we get in. But I think we can explore this some more later on. We're getting a couple of specific questions about specific races. The one that everybody's talking about, Waters-Ozawa. So close, and asking why always so close. Any thoughts about that?
I got a text from Tommy Waters just a couple of hours ago saying he's still weighing his options and he would let me know once he decided what he was going to do. My question to him was, are you going to ask for a recount?
Which is difficult here.
It is. You have to go to the Hawaii Supreme Court. You have to demonstrate that there's some reason to have a recount. Isn't that what Tommy did 4 years ago? And
they said no.
Yeah, it didn't happen. No, I think.
Well, that was 60 whole votes.
Now it's 22 votes. I mean,
40 votes.
Can you imagine going to bed thinking that you've won and then you wake up and find out that you lost? And I don't know how to explain. I mean, that district from Hawaii Kai to Kahala and into Waikiki, it's enormous. And I don't know. I mean, what do? You think, gee, if I only had shook 22 more hands, then somehow I would have pulled it off, you know?
And it seemed pretty clear to me that voters understood that a vote for Waters was a vote for Kurt Caldwell. I mean, a vote to support the mayor, and a vote for Ozawa was a vote to continue checking his power. Even if some voters sort of found Ozawa sometimes a bit abrasive or a little too aggressive, they knew that he was there to check Kurt Caldwell's power. And so I imagine that it just shows how divided people in East Honolulu are about the mayor too.
Catherine, do you see that the same way, that this was a referendum on the mayor?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, he's just going to have a more difficult time, whatever he tries to get in at the council level.
Do you think that was a mistake for the mayor to step in so vigorously in that race?
No, I think you'd have to. If I was mayor, I'd probably do the same thing.
I mean, it would be the other story right now, right?
Right.
He'd be celebrating having the 5-4 advantage, talk about the council on Maui, and a mayor wanting to work with them. I mean, it really did look like it was going to go that way.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing in Honolulu Hali to have, not a majority in your favor. It's another thing to have a majority that is really mad at you.
And in your face.
Yes.
I mean, because in my observation is that an awful lot of politics, particularly at that building, is very personal. Mm. And you guys can talk about that.
Wasn't it Richard Barreca that Frank Fossey actually banned from the premises for a while there? I mean,
I think we all got banned at one time or another.
Yeah, and shades of Trump, because the poor CNN reporter who couldn't go back for his live shot afterwards. I think you and I have been in Mayor Fossey's office when he didn't agree with our story, and he'd tell him to turn the lights off, for the TV people. And so we just said, well, you know what? We're going to turn our lights on and keep asking questions.
Technology. Okay, so most people in Hawaii are only familiar with the Republican Party being responsible for the overthrow.
Well,
that's
not
quite
sure.
right.
Okay,
because most, it was.
You studied the overthrow.
I think they called it a republic.
Right.
But that's about as close as. Yeah. Republicans need to learn how to relate and communicate in a way that islanders can trust. Anyway, that's one viewer. Okay. You may be wrong about Republicans not having much of a shot at Hawaii governorship. Historically, Governor Quinn was a representative,
That's true.
Representative Eddie Anderson almost beat John Waihee, as did Fred Hemmings. Linda Lingle kicked the Dems' butts.
Well, so this is an interesting point, and the viewer is certainly right about this historically, but the thing is the Republican Party has changed. I mean, this is a broader story about polarization in American politics where you have today, you used to have liberal Republicans, conservative Democrats. Today in Congress, for example, the most liberal Republican is still more conservative than the most conservative, or still more liberal. I've mixed this all up. Anyway, the point is that the parties have become the parties have become far more ideologically grouped. And so, and that was my point earlier about the nationalization of American politics, is that you can't carve out those brands that used to work much better here because the Republican Party today is so deeply conservative and they keep becoming more and more polarized every election, including this one.
You know, Bill Quinn was actually appointed. It was the territorial period. Then he did end up winning the first governorship over Jack Burns once they were a state, and then he lost, and that was it. Linda Lingle lost her first time out against Ben Cayetano. It was a heck of a race, very close. And when she did win, she was up against Mazie Hirono, who at the time was a very weak opponent. She's a much stronger candidate now. She also had, unlike Marissa Kearns and Andrea DePola, a pretty charismatic running mate in Duke Iona. And I would say she's an outlier. She was a unique force along with Charles DeJoux, but the numbers don't lie. The data is clear. Republicans have struggled, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Do you think that Hawaii is the worst for the lack of two parties? I've got a couple of questions here about that. You know, how can we get anything done with only one party in power? You'd think you could get anything done with one party in power, but I think it's just the opposite sometimes.
Well, I think that, so there are more and more what we call trifectas, right? State governments where one party controls the entire legislature and the governor's office. In fact, after this last election, there's only one state in the nation, only Minnesota, that has divided control of their House and Senate in the legislature. That hasn't happened in 100 years. But I think Hawaii probably is the chief example of a one-party state, and what you get is a lack of transparency in the legislature. I think you don't see a lot of responsiveness to voters, who aren't reliable Democratic voters like here, union voters, and I think that does explain a lot of people's frustrations.
Let me ask, Colleen, was there on Maui, was there a lot of enthusiasm for this election, or were people kind of bleh?
For the local races, like the council race and the mayor's race, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, but it was business as usual for the national races. I think there's still a lot of strong support for Senator Hirono and Tulsi Gabbard. So yeah, as far as national races go, I don't think they maybe drew as much or created as much drama in Maui County.
In terms of the your legislators, all of them were reelected, right? And with no problem, and they're all Democrats now. It used to be Maui could at least run a handful of Republicans, and what was it like in that sense? Is it just a one-party island now?
I mean, I think it's good in a sense that it's most of the politics are nonpartisan. I mean, as far as the council goes and the mayor's race goes, but yeah, I think we still find things to get divided on, unfortunately, whether it's Democrat or Republican.
So on that question of enthusiasm, we could talk about turnout this year, and I've heard many people say that the lack of a two-party system creates so few interesting races, especially for a general election. So our turnout statewide this year was about 52.6%. An awful lot that came in the last printout. I guess it wasn't that high. Hawaii County was the lowest, with no contested mayor's race. Not really much going on there, and then
Except for lava.
Lava.
And that disrupted a number of people.
Yeah, that might affect. Oh, you think that might have affected the number of people that voted?
I don't know. I don't know what I think they were able to vote by mail, but I would think that sure the upheaval of having, I think it was two districts, right, that were precincts that were affected.
Well, and the storms.
Right.
And, yeah, Oahu was right there with the state total of 52%, and Kauai County wins once again, 58%. What do you think it would take to get people more enthusiastic? Is this turnout as bad as people say, or is there just statistical, or why do we have such?
It is bad. I mean, let's not try and sugarcoat it. It was slightly up over 2014, the last time we had a gubernatorial contest, but it's pathetic, and we own that. And to your viewer who wrote in and saying we should have a two-party system, it would be more dynamic, I completely agree. I would also make a plug for independent and third-party candidates. There were actually a number of Green and Libertarian and nonpartisan candidates on the general election ballot, but they just have not really taken any root here, and it is unfortunate. Having said all that, our primary election was pretty interesting, including 2 races for Congress and the governor's race. It was very dynamic, and our primary election in many ways is our general election.
That's right. And one thing I would say, though, is that there are institutional reforms that can happen that don't require third parties. I mean, you can go to a California top 2 system, which does make general elections still pretty exciting. You could have multi-member districts. I mean, there's a lot of things we could do to keep the general election interesting.
Gee, maybe we should have a con to decide that.
But we should point out, though, that Kauai, even though it has the best turnout, right, they're going to be able to mail in their ballots next time. And so that they're going to be leading the way. And
Although it is a pilot project, is my understanding, they'll report back to the legislature. The desire of those who favor absentee is that it goes statewide, and we're still moving slowly in that direction.
Just watch for one incumbent to get unelected under that system, and that would be the end of it. Yeah, well, one of our viewers did write in, with the two parties, this is sort of a mixed question. If a con had moved Hawaii to a California-style primary, as you just described, would the two parties in Hawaii be more equal? This concept of, they are floated the idea of ranking candidates, so you can, the number one vote, number two vote. Do you think that we need something like that?
I think the question originally was, would that help Republicans? I think in some races it would, like a Charles DeJoux, who, by the way, has left the Republican Party over a disagreement with President Trump, just like Beth Fukumoto. If we had a situation like in California where the top two candidates went on to the general election, you would have had Josh Green and Jill Tokuda vying for a pretty good race for lieutenant governor. You would have had Doug Chin and Ed Case go on to vie for that first congressional race. Yes, none of them are Republicans, but I think it is possible, and in California you're starting to see that. Still, the Democrats have been prevailing primarily in California, right?
That's right. It hasn't been as successful as people hoped. It hasn't really created the kind of competition they thought. And in terms of ranked choice voting that you mentioned, Maine adopted this, and it's actually one of the reasons we don't know who won the 2nd Congressional District of Maine is they're still trying to figure out how to distribute those second voter preferences. The problem is most folks find that really confusing. Right. But I agree with Chad. It's not going to help the Republican Party probably. We'll just get probably more progressive Democrats and mainstream Democrats. But I think it would lead to more interesting races.
Definitely.
Interesting caller question, the punchline being the person who called. Okimoto, Val Okimoto in Mililani, was a Trump supporter and won at a much narrower margin in Mililani than previously. And the caller is someone named Marilyn.
Marilyn Lee.
It just says Marilyn.
I'm just guessing. Hi, Marilyn, if you are watching. She had that seat for a while. She lost to Beth Fukumoto twice, I believe, at least. The margin was not that close. It was at least 6 or 7 or more percentage points, and I'm sorry for your loss. But Val Okimoto, I think Mililani Malka is Republican country in some ways, as well as Democrat. They have done pretty well there. Beth Fukumoto was elected there. So.
Where is Republican country in Hawaii anymore? I mean, it was Maui. I mean, Marikawa was kind of a Republican, right? Was he originally?
Oh, yeah, before he was.
Yeah, I mean, it was traditionally parts of Kailua, parts of Kona area, certain other neighborhoods. Hawaii Kai, we said that, but then Stanley Chang ended up knocking off Sam Sloan there, but Gene Ward still represents the area. I mean, there are pockets. They tend to be more affluent neighborhoods.
But Cynthia Thielen still represents Kailua.
Correct.
Even if she was a little worried, I think, this time
Kaneohe Bay Drive. Yeah.
I just remember how incredible it was when Maui Mayor Linda Lingle became governor, and everybody was like, whoa. You know?
Well, back at the time, though, as I recall, there was a lot of talk about Maui was the real, if you win Maui, then you had a chance in the other islands. You blended, but the Republican Party now has gotten so soft that, you would get Maui and Oahu, you could win the state. I mean, I remember that was the concept, so they would really fight hard on Maui. But like you said, they just don't show up even. Right?
And it was a more moderate Republican brand back then.
Definitely.
I mean, you could pitch yourself as kind of a business conservative. I don't think that's possible anymore.
So I'm enjoying some of these questions coming in. It seems like the viewers are very interested in this party question. How can Hawaii's Green Party strengthen? This seems like it should be the most important party in Hawaii. The performance of these third parties this year was worse than ever. We had a nonpartisan running for governor because he got more votes than the Green Party.
Right.
I mean, so what's happening with third parties in Hawaii? Is that a nationwide thing?
It is not happening here, and it is a nationwide thing. I personally, as a voter, as an American, as someone who lives in Hawaii as a resident, I would like to have more options. But the reality is those folks I know are just going to lose. I mean, think about if you hated Trump and you hated Clinton, what were you going to do? Was it going to be Jill Stein, the Green candidate? Was that her name?
Yeah.
There was another candidate, Gary Johnson, right? But you look at it and you go, well, look, it's Trump and Clinton. And I don't know if we'll ever get to that point, to a real multi-party system. I would like to have that option, but you tend to think, I'm going to vote for a loser. I'm going to vote for someone who doesn't have a chance.
Let me ask, Colleen, on Maui, this Ohana group, do you think that has sort of the foundational possibilities of creating another party? Because Maui has been known to generate some interesting parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that right now at this point, it's kind of one of the de facto parties. There's, the Ohana Coalition that's very progressive, and then the other side, which is seen as, the establishment, the mainstream. So right now, that's kind of the political dynamic that's going on. It's not so much Republican, Democrat. It's more, old school, or, if old boy network, if you want to call it, and then progressive party on the.
How did they run in that way? Did they say, we're members of the Ohana Party? Did they have a stamp on their brochure?
So they, the group that's supporting them, they can't, it's a super PAC, so they can't, there's limits with the way they can interact.
Oh,
with
so
the
there was a super PAC that was advertising for them?
There's a number of groups, but the main thing is they put out these flyers that say, vote for all 9 Ohana candidates. And again, the candidates, they're not the ones saying, I'm part of this, but the support does help them, I believe.
Oh, it's interesting. What do you guys think of that?
It's an interesting idea, and it hasn't got as much attention. I think you're talking about having a hui, an identity. I mean, a Gary Hoozer's group on Kauai has pushed for something along these same lines, and it seems like they are starting to have some success. You're identifying with an ideology, but not a mainstream party ideology. And in the case of the Ohana, I mean, what a great name for a for a coalition,
for
right?
a Hawaii-based political party.
Exactly. Yeah. And there have been others that have come along as well. That could be a new way to get more people engaged.
And I should add, one candidate mentioned to me, she said, we're always referred to as the Ohana candidates, but, the other candidates, they kind of work together like a slate too. Why don't we call them the ILWU candidates or the Chamber of Commerce candidates? And I said, that's a fair point, but the level of organization and cohesiveness that the Ohana Coalition movement has, I think stands out.
And Colleen has made a point that I think is very important. The county councils, the county mayors, they are nonpartisan, and I think that really helps other groups come along to break away from that democratic dominance.
Remember the Independence for Godly Government?
Yes, or Rick Reed, right?
Rick Reed,
Maui,
Nishiki,
as a matter of fact.
Nishiki,
Wayne, right?
Wayne Nishiki, Kathy Hoshijo,
That's
who
right.
ended up making a good run at lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
They were real, right? The Gabbards were associated with them.
Mike Gabbard, that's right.
But
it didn't last super long.
Just like 3 or 4 elections,
Yeah.
I think. But I mean, could we be seeing a nation, emerging third party here? Do you think?
had the
Particularly
best
when you've got
There was the best party.
Well,
Frank
that was
Fossil.
Movie Hanneman had a party.
What was his called? I've already forgotten what it was
I
called.
wasn't invited to that party.
neither were enough people apparently.
Enough voters.
But if you look at how a new party might form, you look for where's the vacuum that people don't have a place. And that's kind of what I'm wondering about.
Sure, that's what you do, but then what happens is the dominant parties realize, hey, there's voters over here, this is an issue, we can own this, and they tend to absorb the enthusiasm that comes from those groups.
It's getting kind
Because
of depressing, yeah.
it's very difficult to keep that organization, that coordination going. It's very difficult if you get elected in the legislature. Imagine if someone got elected to the legislature as a member of a third party. They'd be shut out of almost everything. It's very difficult to deliver for your constituents. So it is tough in this country to really gain as a third party. I am not optimistic that's going to happen.
But at least it's issue-oriented. And if you ask yourself, and I ask all of you, what issues do you think people were talking about most? They did pass the vacation rental thing, but that was the only place that happened. What were the issues people were talking about? I didn't see a lot of issue talk in this campaign.
Well, had there been a con, and just for the record, Civil Beat.
Con-Am.
Or even a Con-Am. And it's funny, they even counted the votes on the Con-Am, even though it was disqualified. It was going to lose anyway, apparently. But had there been a Con, Civil Beat is on record having advocated for that. one of the main things we would have liked to have seen was initiative. I mean, isn't that how the GMO issue came about on Maui, or did it come from the council?
It was a voter initiative.
A voter initiative. We don't have it at the state level. We're one of the few states, many states that do not. And for example, you could propose term limits. Well, does it come out of the legislature?
We've got the graphic up here on the outcome of the Constitutional Convention question, and it was pretty overwhelming. I mean, that's not even a glimmer. What happened there?
Well, you certainly cannot discount the groups that was against it. Preserve Our Hawaii. It was primarily the Hawaii Government Employees Association, many of the other unions, but you also have the unusual partnership with the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce. So you have pro-labor, pro-business. ACLU
Sierra
of Hawaii.
Club, right?
Sierra Club, some very powerful, very influential groups. I think all told about $2.7 million was spent either for and against the Con-Am and against the Con-Con. There was no pro-Con-Con group advertising. And when you saw those TV ads, don't be con-conned, I think it was persuasive. Oh, there was even one with the 4 governors.
Yeah. Oh, that was the Con-Am.
That was the Con-Am, right.
But the Civil Beat editorial board was probably the only group that really was pushing the
Holding the torch.
Holding the torch. And it's interesting because my public policy center at UH, we gathered 18 people from the neighborhood boards. They got to hear all the arguments back and forth. They supported a con-con. And so I think part of the problem was people really were just talked out of it. And some of the earlier polling
Even our own polling indicated that if you ask the question, would you like to have citizens be able to, have a lottery to go for education, or to have recreational marijuana, or term limits, or initiative, referendum, recall, a lot of voters started to go, okay. But then if you just ask the question straight, that's when they got turned off, and those are the numbers you're seeing.
Well, sure, because they were told they're going to lose their collective bargaining rights, that we're going to become some sort of environmental health
It's going to cost $56 million,
I mean, and there was no one on the other side really had the resources to counter that.
Yeah, it was fear tactics.
On the Con-Am, I was just surprised at how long it took for them to pull those campaign ads, because the decision came out Friday. I don't think they pulled it until Tuesday.
I think the television station sent their receptionist home.
We
Don't
work
take
on
that
TV,
call.
You know how quickly they can pull either an airline ad when there's a crash, right? But it took like several days for them to figure it
There
out.
was another Con-Am ad ready to run that Monday, and again the same theme. It never did air, I don't believe. So,
But that was the most interesting thing that was happening in this whole election.
yes.
And I think that the teachers union didn't expect the opposition to get geared up so quickly. I think they were waiting, it'll happen eventually, but they were just boom, right out the door.
What do you think, and this might be a little bit off of the election subject, what do you think happened? Some people have suggested to me that HSTA kind of got conned, that the legislature just was actually out for power to get to the property taxes, and they just wanted to use the teachers as a Trojan horse to get a hold of that, power. You think that's a legitimate theory?
Well, I think that the teachers, I don't know if they got conned so much as they didn't fully understand how they could be used. I mean, I think that, if you watch how that Con-Am morphed over the course of its time in the legislature, it became a bit more vague, in a way that almost became irresponsible, which is why the court ended up invalidating it. So I don't want to say the teachers got conned, but I'm not sure they really understood how this could end up being pretty bad for them if they get their members really enthusiastic about passing this, and then all of a sudden it's this kind of confusing mess, and it ends up being pretty demoralizing. I think they should actually be pleased that the court invalidated it, because if it had gone down in flames, which I think it would have, I think that would have been even rougher for the HSTA leadership.
It's hard for me to imagine that 76 lawmakers, and most of them did vote for the Con-Am. I think only was Gil Rivera the only one in the Senate. I don't remember how it broke down in the House. I think probably a few Republicans, but even Andrea Topola was open to the idea. Remember, the HSTA had approached the legislature in 2 previous sessions, and there was various things that they were looking at. As Corey Rosenlee, the HSTA had always said, look, there's only so many pots of money to go to. There's a GET, there's the income tax, there's a TAT, then there's property tax. I think the thing that shot it down in so many ways is the language was vague. And the idea of giving the state the authority to tax property, authority that they did not already have, that already is the kuleana of the counties, I think that was upsetting. And frankly, whenever the legislature finds a way to get more money coming in, there's always some fear that somehow they're going to dip into that. And so I think the High Court made the right decision. What came out of it that was good, and I hope is something that we see materialize in the session, is can we find a way to help our schools more?
Lee, do you think that that's maybe the silver lining in that the message is out there, that the schools need more help? Especially Maui schools, rural schools, right?
Yeah, it is. I think it is good that the message is out there. I think, though, Maui County was very much against it, both the administration side and the council side, because they're very wary of state coming for county taxes, especially when it comes to the TAT. That's a sore point for Maui County. So they're concerned about having another source of funding that the state could potentially pull from take the county share.
The innocent bystander in this con-am, con-con debate was the charter amendment on Oahu for HART.
That nobody paid attention to.
Yeah, and everybody was told, don't vote for this con-con, don't for this, and then they crushed the charter amendment too for apparently no reason that I could think of.
Other than the fact that the name HART was
Right. And so, yeah,
in the charter question.
Some might think that was just people are frustrated because the price tag has just gone through the roof, and it was like, no, whatever you ask for, no.
It was also a lengthy question, and whenever you have
Right.
a long question, I think voters just look at that and go, well, I got to get home or go to the beach, and no.
And you made the point that it was a housekeeping issue.
It was.
That it might have made HART more efficient, but guess what? Voters said no, so you're just going to have to figure it out.
What do you think happened? Do you think it was just confusion, or do you think people actually, it was a negative vote on HART? I think that's.
It was a negative vote on HART. It was confusion. I mean, all the things that were mentioned. I think what's curious to me, though, is that, this was important for Kurt Caldwell, and he didn't seem, which is surprising because the mayor is usually good at this, and he certainly can command a lot of resources. He didn't seem to really put up much of any effort to get this through, and I don't understand why that happened, because this was pretty important for the success of HART, I think, at least to run more efficiently. The whole issue was about getting a quorum, which is totally obscure to voters, but important for the mayor and HART. And I didn't see him really make much of an effort to communicate why this was important.
I think he was just too busy worrying about the $44 million and the FTA.
Marcel Honore, our reporter who covers HART and Rail, did interview the mayor, and he did express strongly that he was worried that it was going to be kind of just passed over, particularly with all the con-con and con-am attention. And there was some concern he expressed that maybe HART should have been the agency that did more to get the word out. And HART says it did. But you're right.
Just a little bit of my perspective, I just happened to, by accident, cover a number of the mayor's press conferences in the last couple of weeks because there were so many called that we didn't put real reporters on it. They sent me. And so what I noticed was every press conference was turned into an attack on Trevor Ozawa about the homeless bills, about the HART budget, about the condemnation of the lane in Portlock. It all ended up being about Ozawa. He seemed just preoccupied with that issue, and it didn't work. Sorry, Mayor, I just had to throw that out. You're mayor. You have a new mayor.
We do.
So tell us about him. A lot of the state doesn't know much about him or where the county is heading.
They'll probably know he's Shane Victorino's dad.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm sure he's trying to distance himself. I'm also
It's
another
hard to
Victorino,
raise a baseball player.
Yeah, so he was a former council member from 2007 to 2016, and so yeah, this is his return to politics. I think he had wanted to when he left the council. I think he kind of was thinking about coming back as mayor, and I think this mayor race is going to come down to a couple things. One, who could get Don Guzman's votes, because he was the council member who finished third, and he has supporters in both camps. He's a Central Maui guy like Mike Victorino, and he also in the past was endorsed by the Ohana Coalition that supported Cochrane. So it's going to be interesting to see who could get those votes, and also who could, shake the stereotypes and broaden their message, because I think they're kind of seen as being on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like I said in the past, Victorino is kind of perceived as the establishment guy, and Cochrane is perceived as, anti-development environmentalist, and they both have tried to shake that image. They say, no, we'll work with anyone. So, it was kind of a referendum to see how people perceive them.
But you've got two different messages from the voters then, in a way, right? You've got the pro-development, moderate mayor that won, and you've got a council now that's went the other direction. Do you think that was intentional or sort of accidental based on personality?
Yeah, I think that was interesting. Yeah, I think it might have come down to personality and the individual races, not so much we're gonna, not so much the Ohana part of it. I think it came down to the, like I said, the individual races.
Other folks' thoughts on the Maui Mary?
I've met him once or twice. He kind of reminds me of Bernard Carvalho. He's kind of a big guy. He's got this presence about him, a smile. He's a glad handler, and I wonder how much personality had to do with it as well. He seems like a guy who likes to work together. I think Ellie Cochran had a lot of strengths as well, but he seems like when he walks in the room, that's the guy everybody knows is there.
Yeah, he definitely has that, big booming personality that I think did help. But yeah, Ellie does have a lot of, support in the community, and she was, involved with Save Honolulu, so she has a lot of that basis in being involved in community causes, and I think that's gained her a lot of supporters.
Kauai Mayor, also interesting race. I think people thought that one might be closer, but Derek Kawakami certainly just...
I never thought it was going to be close. I mean, he left the legislature to go back home, a long-time, well-known family on Kauai, and I just didn't think it was ever going to be a close race, and sure enough, he won that pretty handily.
You could tell even in the primary,
Yeah.
if you counted up the two other candidates' votes, Derek Kawakami still would have won.
I got the sense he got very frustrated working at the legislature.
Oh, I don't think he liked it at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he was actually an appointee. He got in there, and then I can't remember if he ran one race as well, but I don't think that was ever his thing,
What sort of a person is he? I mean, in terms of what does he represent? I mean, is there an issue there that stands up with him, or is it, what do you guys
he
think?
supported the racetrack. Yeah,
he's kind of a level-headed guy. He's got a nice bearing about him. I think Kauai tends to be a little bit more mellow, and I think his name recognition had a heck of a lot to do with it. I think he was on the council, too, if I remember correctly. If I have that wrong, Derek, I apologize.
No, he
but,
did. He was.
but his roots are deep there, and I think the issue that's been so big there was the flooding, of course, that happened earlier this year, and also dealing with traffic. That's always been a problem, and short-term rentals.
I mean, it could be sometimes an island's personality will lend itself to wanting to have someone they can trust as a leader in crisis because they're exposed out there to so much.
And Bernard Carvalho certainly was successful in that role. So, I mean, I think that they tend to elect people who are, good executives. And I imagine Derek Kawakami will carry on that legacy of Carvalho.
I don't know if this is a good question because in Hawaii we for many, many years, ethnic politics was very commonly discussed. But in the last few moments of the campaign, when someone made a video mocking David Ige, some people freaked out, like, oh, that's a horrible thing to have done, to represent, make a racist caricature of the governor. So we do have a question who asks, what effect, if any, does the panel think the candidate's ethnicity had on the results of the race? I'm going to say races. So what do you think? Let's start with the governor's race, ethnicity in the governor's race.
Thanks for not bringing up a controversial question, Daryl.
Well, we're heading toward the end. The term stretch.
Yeah, I mean, we know what the studies say. We know what the history is. My PhD was on this. There's no question that ethnicity plays a role in how a person votes. So does gender, for that matter. So does socioeconomic status. To what degree, it's hard to say. Anecdotally, we've always said that, the Japanese American vote is the most important, particularly the elder AJA vote, and that if there's an AJA on the ballot, they're going to vote for them. I think there's some truth to that. I don't know how much that's still holding true right now, but you can't deny that it is a factor. I just don't know to what degree anymore.
Catherine, what do you think?
Pass on that one. I don't know.
You're going to pass? Oh, come on. Colin, come on.
Well, I mean, Chad is really the expert on this question.
Oh, thanks, Colin.
You wrote a dissertation about it. But
I'm going to take the hit on this.
But no, I mean, it's obviously a factor. I mean, I think it tends to really exhibit itself when you're talking about enthusiasm for a candidate. I mean, you have immediately a connection with people in the community. They turn out to support you. I mean, if you're what as political scientists say, a co-ethnic, then I think that is where it really makes a difference. Is your folks will turn out for you, and you have immediately an in with folks in that community, which is why I think you tend to see members of the legislature reflect the ethnic makeup of the districts they represent, and that's not just because people only vote for people of their own ethnic identity, but I mean I think just being part of that community means that you connect better with people.
And the reality is you're not going to get elected, particularly to the federal offices, to the statewide offices, unless you appeal
Exactly.
to a broad, diverse electorate. I mean, that's the only way you're going to get in. If you're only appealing to the Haole vote or the Filipino vote or the Hawaiian vote, it isn't going to happen. Will it help?
Colleen, I'm curious about ethnic politics on Maui. Do you see it?
Is it in what sense? Like,
Well, do you feel like there's sort of a Haole kind of set of issues and an Asian kind of set of issues and maybe a Portuguese set of issues, or?
yeah, it depends where you go. Again, tough. Be careful, but yeah, I mean the central Maui area is kind of seen as a stronghold. Like a lot of Asian and Filipino voters are there, and then demographics change as you go to there's Hawaiian and Haole communities as well. So
And you worked on Molokai for a while.
I did, yeah. So mostly Hawaiian there. But yeah, I was seeing a poll, I think it was on Civil Beat, about how the different ethnic groups were voting. That was very interesting to me because he looked like Ige was doing best amongst the Japanese voters.
Yeah, including with Colleen Hanabusa in the race, he was doing better in that. And so it is true, it does play a role. But I think cost of living isn't an ethnic issue in many ways. It's something that no matter your skin color, your ancestry, we're all facing that as probably our top issue.
But gender, I mean, I think everybody thought with what was happening nationally that Colleen would get in, strong candidate, reaches a cross-section of race, but the voters didn't go that way.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and thank all of you very much. We have reached the end of our hour, and I'd like to thank our guests as well as our viewers for joining us. Colin Moore, thank you very much. Chad Blair from Civil Beat, Catherine Cruz from Hawaii Public Radio, and Colleen Uechi from the Maui News. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you. And next week on Insights, can ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft coexist with traditional taxis? I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.